I would like to discuss what is going on with Daniel Shapiro, Distinguished Fellow, Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council. Very good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on such a pressing day. My first question to you is related indeed to what we can expect from the United States. The Secretary of State has said that the U.S. is not involved, but Iran does not think that that's the case.
So much. Appreciate it.
This was a unilateral Israeli strike. He said that he warned Iran not to take any action against the United States and that the United States would respond to defend itself. So now President Trump, when he meets with his advisors in the morning, will face some very important decisions. First, since Iran will probably retaliate against Israel for sure, the question is, will the United States come to Israel's defense as it did during the Biden administration, both last April and last October 2024? I think it's likely that President Trump will feel he wants to do that, but he's going to want to be thoughtful and careful about what could pull the United States into direct conflict with Iran. Iran's also going to want to be very careful about that. The two sides had been negotiating to try to reach a deal to limit Iran's nuclear program. President Trump said to end Iranian nuclear enrichment. Iran had not agreed to that term. There's a serious question about whether that diplomacy is viable now. Iran may seek to sprint to break out to its own nuclear capability, and that might present President Trump with a very major dilemma, whether the United States would use its even stronger capabilities than Israel has to strike underground targets and prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. That's not a position President Trump wanted to be in, but he may find himself in that very soon.
It's exactly in those nuclear conversations that I would like to focus for a moment, because the information that we have at this stage is that those conversations are still expected to take place over the weekend. So I'm wondering what this escalation from Israel can mean for those conversations. Give us a little bit more detail in terms of, and given all your experience, in terms of how these nuclear talks could actually unfold.
President Trump had asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to hold off on any strike against Iran precisely to give more time for that diplomacy to unfold. And indeed, there's a meeting that has been scheduled for this Sunday in Oman between the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. It's not clear whether that meeting can go forward. Even had the meeting taken place before, without these strikes having taken place, it was not clear that there was common ground for any kind of agreement. Again, the dispute, quite black and white dispute over whether or not Iran would be permitted to continue to enrich uranium on its soil, was bedeviling the ability to get to an agreement. But now there's a different question. Iran, which now looks very weak and very vulnerable and has been proven to be penetrated by Israel, which struck nuclear sites, nuclear research on weaponization sites, many senior leaders in the Iranian military and the IRGC, ballistic missile launch sites as well, now may feel that it must pursue a nuclear weapon for its own protection, for the very survival of its regime. That will put it in direct conflict with the goals of the Trump administration. But I think that raises serious questions about the viability of the nuclear talks that were scheduled for Sunday and that have been underway now for 2 months.
I would also like to look at what the UN watchdog said a couple of days ago. They actually said, and there was even a vote, that Iran is breaking rules on nuclear activity. So they said this. My question to you is whether this is a reasonable enough excuse for Israel to then argue that they are preemptively attacking Iran.
Iran has been in violation of many of its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and various UN Security Council resolutions and the 2015 nuclear deal that President Obama negotiated. It is currently refusing to allow inspections at certain sites. It is currently in high excess of the permitted amount of enriched uranium and centrifuges that it should be allowed to have. And so Israel, of course, was correct, as was the International Atomic Energy Agency when it cited Iran for being in violation of those commitments. So Israel's point was that since negotiations were dragging and did not seem to be close to preventing Iran from crossing that threshold, And since Iran now has enough highly enriched uranium to produce 10 nuclear weapons in a very short period of time, if it so chooses, that it simply couldn't wait any longer. Obviously, much of the world had hoped that the diplomacy that President Trump was engaged in would produce a deal. Israel's view, apparently, was that it couldn't wait any longer, that Iran was so close to certain thresholds that it had to act, and that's what it did tonight.
And having served as U.S. ambassador to Israel, I would like to understand what are your thoughts in terms of how this development is being seen in Israel. Do you get a sense that perhaps the popularity, the support for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is at stake here?
I think many Israelis will feel that these strikes were necessary, perhaps overdue. Iran, of course, has spent years trying to build this nuclear capability. Its leadership openly calls for Israel's destruction. It has armed and backed and funded and trained numerous terrorist proxies on Israel's borders that have struck Israel with missiles and rockets and terrorist attacks. And so I think for many Israelis, there will be a great deal of satisfaction. Also some concern about how severe the Iranian retaliation might be. Israel has been at war for 20 months since the October 7th attacks. Its population is tired. Its population has to run to shelters when they hear sirens, whether there are rockets coming from the Houthis or from Gaza or from Lebanon or from Iran or from Syria. And so many Israelis, while they may take some satisfaction that their arch enemy has been hit and hit badly, that this could produce counterattacks and many more months of war. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu's own popularity is already fairly set in the Israeli public. It's not high. Many Israelis are looking forward to the day when there's new leadership. But again, a decision that is basically welcomed by many Israelis certainly will be something that he will try to add to his arsenal as he seeks a re-election within the next year.
And just finally, when you think about some of the comments that the President of the United States has made in the past, he has been very vocal about how he would like to end the war in Ukraine, how he would have liked already to see also an end to the war between Israel and Hamas. I'm wondering whether the president can actually play a critical role here in bringing peace to the Middle East.
That's his aspiration. He said it very clearly. He wants to be a president of peace. He wants to bring an end to wars and prevent wars. He thinks of himself as a great deal maker who can produce negotiations that will lead to the end of the war in Ukraine, that will lead to the end of the war between Israel and Hamas, that could prevent Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon and prevent a war. He's struggling on all three fronts. He's dealing with a variety of actors, such as Vladimir Putin, who seems to be committed to his agenda of overrunning Ukraine and making Ukraine essentially a vassal state of Russia. Hamas is unwilling to release hostages, and Israel feels it has to continue to fight to completely destroy Hamas's ability to govern Gaza. And of course, Israel and Iran are such bitter enemies that even motivated U.S. diplomacy has not seemed to prevent this escalation. So I think he's probably pretty frustrated. He's still early in his term. He still has time to work on these deals and others that he seeks. But this is not the scenario he had hoped to be in 5 months into his term.
Well, we have to leave the conversation there, but we appreciate that you joined us today. Danielle Shapiro, Distinguished Fellow for Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council, and of course, the former U.S. Ambassador to Israel as well.